what difference does it make if the mind thinks that the way out of the matrix is to intellectualize further or to ignore it? It doesn't matter. The mind is independent. So the whole sense that you're going for, I believe, is to like get a good look at that thing and be like, look at it go. Look at it intellectualize. Watch it. Yeah. You know, and I do think that the trap of that is, if there is one, is as it's like intellectualizing, processing, trying to figure out itself, is that it could fragment, and then you could like think, you could have thoughts looking at thoughts being like, look at me, I'm looking at this now from some meta position. Yeah. And so you got to like look at, so you have to get in touch with the observer of all observers, the one watching the whole show.
All right, Stay Spiritual team, we're back from our little micro summer vacation there. It's good to be back. We have a Zen Buddhism video we're going to look at. We've looked at Buddhism before, but maybe I don't know much about Zen. So,
well, I think you can kind of talk about Zen forever. So it's an endless well. So
this is kind of like an introduction video. So it's done by Mostly True. I'll leave a link in the description box and we'll just get into it.
Long ago, two monks were traveling together in the countryside, an elder monk and a junior. Eventually, they come across a river with a strong current and a young woman waiting on one side, unable to cross by herself. She asked the monks, "Will you help me cross the river?" The younger monk remembers he's taken a sacred vow to never touch a woman, no matter the circumstance. But before he can refuse to help, the elder monk picks her up, crosses the river, and sets her down on the other side. She thanks them and they continue on their way. The younger monk, appalled at the behavior of his elder, stays quiet, growing with anger. 1 hour passes, then 2. Finally, the younger monk snaps. "Why did you carry that woman when we took a vow to never lay a finger on one?" Calm and collected, the elder monk responds, "I sat her down hours ago on the other side of that river. Why are you still carrying her?"
Oh.
Epic mic drop moment. Dude, why'd you make me the stupid monk and yourself the old wise one? 'Cause I'm enlightened, brah. That's why. Maybe when...
Remember what I was saying, like, when we were at the cottage, and I was just, like, imagining, like, one guy meditating and another guy coming along and being like, hey. And, like, showing him that he was meditating harder or something like that. Like, there is kind of, like, a weird competition type thing sometimes in spirituality. It's just hilarious because
when you wake up, you can be the older monk next time. Dude, I don't think you know how enlightened... Not enlightened. Bro, that's not how... Not... Are you really gonna... Enlightened. Anyway, it's an old Zen Buddhist tale kind of about how holding on to stuff with your hands isn't the only way you can hold on to stuff. Your mind can hold on to stuff too, bro. Damn, dude. That's hella deep. I know, dude, right? Anyway... What exactly is Zen Buddhism? Let's take a look. Alright, so Zen Buddhism is kind of like a stripped down, simpler version of Buddhism. It's focused much more on just the practice of meditation. See, while other forms of Buddhism practice meditation as well, they also have a lot of scripture, rituals, and rules that come along with it. And Zen just throws all that other stuff away, leaving just the meditation part. Other forms of Buddhism focus on gradually accumulating karma through good actions as a way to become enlightened.
So did Zen Buddhism, I don't know how much you looked into this prior to this, Zen obviously came, it's like post the beginning of Buddhism, and then Zen Buddhism was like a style or something.
Yeah, it looks like
later.
It's come after.
And that makes me think about the technology of spiritual practice or the technology of religion. You know what I mean? Starting from like, not monotheism. What's the one with many gods?
Polytheism.
Polytheism rendered into monotheism, rendered into like over time, you know. And then if you look at Shinyan Morty, he's talking about like the time is getting nigh, and we need a faster route to enlightenment. And I tend to agree. I feel like only if we don't want to blow up the earth. Only if we don't want to Oppenheimer ourselves into, oblivion. Yeah. I feel like we do need faster routes. And there's some great teachers coming out. Check out the video we just did with Angelo DeLulio from Simply Always Awake. Yep. He is one of the new practitioners, this like new wave of enlightened teachers. And he's got some awesome strategies and tips on how to get to awakening, in my opinion.
All right.
Whereas Zen sees enlightenment as something we already have, we just have to become aware of it or notice it. Bodhidharma, who brought these ideas into China, is quoted describing Zen, or Chan in Chinese, as a direct transmission outside of scripture, not relying on words or letters. The practice of Zen is a process of freeing yourself from compulsory thought. A lot of us have a compulsion to generate concepts from our daily life experience, and we tend to be yanked around by our thoughts. What happens when you relax your mind and observe it without interfering in its natural process? This state is known as original mind and is believed to already be present in all people. And it's through the practice of meditation that you can become aware of your original mind. A simple way to start practicing meditation is to try to focus your attention on your breath. Try focusing on the sensations associated with inhalation and exhalation. Notice what it feels like as you inhale. Notice what it feels like as you exhale. Notice the feeling of existential dread you have when you think about how meaningless your existence is and, God damn it, I have to go to work and oh, whoops. Kind of let my mind wander there for a minute. No biggie. When your mind wanders and you start thinking of other things, notice that moment and then gently guide your attention back to your breath. And do this over and over and over again. Each time your mind wanders, notice that it was wandering and bring it back to the...
Sorry, I'm so interrupty this episode. Yeah. I was in a Walmart today and I passed a magazine that said like zombie generation, and it showed like a kid like staring like this, that 1,000-yard stare. Yeah. And I think about that Wild Wild Country Osho documentary and how the sannyasins, they were like, like the small town people were like, they had that look, that creepy look, and you've been around people that have kind of a look of sort of like blank affect.
The blank-eyed look, yeah.
And it's interesting that somebody who's just not overly animated, not neurotic, sort of calm and peaceful appears creepy to somebody who's like, what are you talking about? Where's your like cartoonish identity? And, or where's your cartoon, pick an identity, anything from Matthew McConaughey to Elon Musk, like, pick an identity. And if you're not like acting out and, I've heard people talk about feeling like weird if they don't, if they're waiting in a waiting room and they're not looking at their phone, you know what I mean? Like they're just like sitting there content. They're like, you feel like a crazy person. Like you're supposed to be like scrolling, that's a good point, busy, right? And what a messed up culture where the one guy, the picture with everything on his brain sweating, is like more relatable than somebody who's like zenned out. They're like zombie generation, or and I'm sure that magazine was talking about like all the technology. Yeah. But I just mean, sometimes we might be like, I'm not getting into spirituality. I'm not getting into meditation. If it's going to turn me into a zombie, that's creepy. I don't want that. I don't want to be whatever that is. Yeah. But it's like, you're not even looking at things with like clear eyes. You're looking at them through the perspective.
Well, isn't that why they say usually it comes through suffering, which kind of like pulls you into maybe some type of spirituality. After like the Doritos, like in the picture here, and the video gaming and vaping and stuff, once you realize that can't do it for you, then you're like, all right, I gotta try something else.
And think about like when you were a teenager. Imagine you met a guy that didn't either smoke or wasn't addicted to video games or didn't have like some vices, and they were just like, I like to read. Is that the type of like? That was probably a smart person, but when I was a kid, it's not the people I usually ran with. I ran with people that were kind of getting after it in life, trying to get as much as you could out of life. Yeah. But then do that long enough and you're like, God, this is meaningless and hopeless. Anyway, I'll stop ranting.
Breath. If it helps, you can kind of think of it like one rep for an exercise. Each time you notice your attention drifting from the breath and you guide it back, that's one rep. You also don't have to be seated to do this. I would do this all day while working at a busy hotel. Phones would be going off, angry customers are yelling at me at the front desk, all while I'm just continually bringing my attention back to my breath. And yeah, I punched a couple of people in the face. Nobody's perfect. But that's a little different than what most would consider Zen meditation. Zen is often described as sit down and do nothing. But a lot of people think, okay, meditation, I gotta clear all the thoughts from my head. So they squint their eyes and they try really hard to empty their mind. Stop. Don't do that. It's not that you should try to force the thoughts out of your head. It's more like sit down and whatever thought pops into your head, just observe it. Don't do anything to the thought. Don't try to force it out of your head. Don't try to hold on to the thought. Don't try to manipulate it in any way. But it's not about having no thoughts. It's more about not letting your thoughts carry you away. Now, you might be kind of confused as to why there's so much emphasis on letting things go, on not interfering with the processes of your mind. Well, a lot of that has to do with how Buddhists see the concept of the self, or rather, not self. See, I was kind of confused when I started reading about the self. I guess it's something I never really thought about. Like, what do you mean, what am I? I'm me. Duh. I have a name, I have skin, I think certain things and have certain beliefs. And yeah, even though I've changed a lot from 5 years ago, it still kind of feels like there's some core part of me that is carried over throughout time, regardless of how I change or what new beliefs I acquire. So all this stuff is pretty new to me, but I'll try my best to explain. So basically, religions like Christianity and Hinduism believe in souls, some immaterial essence within us. A soul is what makes you. It's like the core essence of who you are. I guess it also floats up into heaven when you die. I don't really know that much about that. But Buddhism sees the self very differently. They don't believe in the idea that you are some unchanging entity or that you have some fundamental core essence to your being. They disregard that idea altogether. This is known as anatta, or non-self. But it doesn't mean that you literally don't exist or anything like that. It just means that you are not some permanent entity. You are just a thought or concept created by your mind. You are like a thought or sensation, and like all other thoughts or sensations, you are impermanent. You come and you go. But then philosophers start mentioning the word self, which I guess is different than a soul. I'm not entirely sure. And then, I'm just gonna use a diagram. Basically, I think some people believe the self is like a thing. The self is responsible for thinking your own thoughts. I guess it's in the middle of your brain. I don't know where it would be, honestly. And so if you have a thought, say you're thinking about tacos, then your self would be the thing that is producing that thought. But I think Buddhists don't believe there is some unified singular thing that is responsible for producing thoughts, because your thoughts and beliefs are always changing, just like everything else in the world. So there's no way for there to be a persisting thing within you. So instead of there being a self, there is just the thoughts. And you can have thoughts about being a self, but having thoughts about being a self doesn't mean there actually is a self in the middle of your head producing those thoughts.
Maybe some, like, the obvious evidence of that is how you change over time. Like, that is affirming, I guess, what he's saying here. How, as we get older and we constantly are changing, there's no thing about you that is, you might be able to nail down that is always the same. Like, there's maybe nothing about you that is, like, ever always consistently the same.
Other than the thing that's been aware the whole time.
Yeah, which I think this is trying to point at.
Right.
So,
yeah.
Thoughts. Think of it like this. There's a space where thoughts and sensations...
Sorry. When you say, other than the thing of you that's been aware the whole time,
yeah,
I'd say like probably like 80 to 90% of people think, yeah, like my memories of my childhood and everything like that.
Yeah.
Like you're literally like outsourcing the thing that's aware.
Yeah,
like making it into a thought form and then saying like, that's me.
Yeah.
It's like, and it's interesting because thought forms can like inhabit parts of your body. It's like they can manifest as like a tension in the forehead or manifest as like back pain or something like that. And you're like, that's me. It's my sense of self there. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But that's not the thing that's been aware the whole time.
Yeah.
Or like consciously... The consciousness is there. I don't claim to know all of it.
Yeah.
Pop up. I guess we could call that space consciousness or awareness. As these thoughts pop up, we tend to hold on to bits and pieces of them, slowly building up a concept of me. And we say, yep, that's what I am. But Buddhism would say, no, that isn't what you are. Those are just a loose collection of thoughts that you've decided to call you. If anything, you are just the space in which those thoughts pop up. You know how if you feel angry or any type of emotion, it doesn't really make sense to think, I am the anger. No, it's more like anger is something that is happening to me. Well, thoughts and sensations of I or me are treated the same way. If you are not the thought of being angry, then you are also not the thought of being a self. But then that gets me wondering, what is the thing that is experiencing the thoughts of being a self? Like, is that what the self is? The thing that experiences the thoughts of being a self? I kind of confuse myself at this point. I don't really know. What do you think, man? God damn it. My brain just exploded. Oh, yeah. You gotta stop doing acid and listening to Alan Watts, bro. Okay, I know this is confusing, but I just want to point out that this really isn't that far out there as an idea, because like plenty of modern philosophers and neuroscientists hold views similar to that of Buddhism's. For example, David Hume, famous Scottish philosopher, describes the self as a bundle of experiences, with no fundamental you that exists independently from the bundle. Instead of there being one thing that is the self, there's rather a bunch of interconnected things interacting together, which creates the illusion of there being a singular I. And there is no thing that is separate from the bundle to perceive it. But I'm not doing his position any justice. I'd recommend reading some of what he wrote. I can't summarize everything he said just in one video, you know? And you might also hear people say things like, you don't exist, or there is no you. And that might sound like something you'd hear from your friend who does a little too much acid, but the idea isn't that there literally is no you, or that reality is just a dream or anything like that. It's more like there is no unified, persisting you, even if it feels like there is. Other contemporary philosophers like Thomas Metzinger have views that are also pretty similar to this, and he describes the self as a physical process of the brain instead of a thing or an innermost core. He goes as far as to say that selves don't exist at all and no one has ever had a self, and I'll be honest, I don't fully understand this position. It's based on research regarding illusions of phantom limbs and a bunch of other shit, but I guess it would be fair to say, well, hold on, a process is also a thing, and like, so what if the self isn't some essence or fundamental core and instead it's a process? What real difference does it make? And that's pretty much where I'm at with this topic. It seems like people are just debating semantics when it comes to what exactly the self is, but you know, there's probably something I'm missing. But the reason why understanding the concept of the self or not self is important has to do with how they thought about attachment.
So what he said there about semantics and everything and there being no self, I was just saying when I got here that I had some ideas from like some pretty long sits, you know, just in contemplation about everything that we do think is ourself, right? So it has been said before that you're not thinking, you're being thought, right? Mm. And I think you can get a sense of that sometimes. I think if you're still enough, long enough, and you get kind of a little bit more of like you're looking at your thoughts as they arise, and you're not like identifying with them, or you know, which is really just thoughts identifying with thoughts. I think you start to see that like so much of what you are is been entrained into you, right? And I think it's the way with many of us in society. We're all like entraining each other with every look we give each other, with every approval or disapproval we give and stuff like that. And you learn over time to like be reactive. You're just reactive all the time. Oh, I got to go to work because anybody that doesn't work is bad, and I got to eat this, and I should eat healthy. I deserve a snack, you know, from all the advertising and everything that's going in. All those thoughts that are running wild in your head that you're identified with, I feel like isn't, it might like say, it might even if you ask it, like, what are you? It might be like, I'm me, I'm a self, I'm here, I am me, you know, but that doesn't mean it's not made up of something that is just kind of just an illusion, like a process that occurs in the mind from indoctrination and entraining from a whole lifetime.
I think a trap in doing this work is the intellectualization of like what's being talked about. When you start learning about these concepts and stuff like that, that's another thing that starts filling the mind. These concepts about like self and no self and thoughts and it's very hard. At least I have found doing the actual work of being able to like, sit and do what he's talking about.
But you'll
like
find
Zen is very basic, it sounds like, and you just sitting, just sit.
Yeah, but if you're sitting with the intent is, it's one thing to sit because it's nice and peaceful to sit. If you've got a mind like a storm cloud and you start to watch that mind and you notice that it wants to intellectualize it, you're not gonna, you could be like, let me just intellectualize. What difference does it make if the mind thinks that the way out of the matrix is to intellectualize further or to ignore it? It doesn't matter. The mind is independent. So the whole sense that you're going for, I believe, is to like get a good look at that thing and be like, look at it go. Look at it intellectualize. Watch it. Yeah. And I do think that the trap of that is, if there is one, is as it's like intellectualizing, processing, trying to figure out itself, is that it could fragment, and then you could like think, you could have thoughts looking at thoughts being like, look at me, I'm looking at this now from some meta position. And so you got to like look at, so you have to get in touch with the observer of all observers, the one watching the whole show. Correct?
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think you're onto it.
So Buddha taught that clinging or attachment is what causes suffering. To cling means to hold on to something with the misunderstanding that that thing is permanent. Just as clinging to a sensation of happiness can lead to disappointment when the feeling inevitably goes away, same goes for the sense of being a self that we experience. And the sense of being a unified self is simply another thing we become attached to. This is because nothing is permanent. No thought, no sensation, no experience is permanent. Everything is in a constant state of change. Everything comes and goes. And it is when we trick ourselves into believing that we can hold on to something forever, we create the conditions for suffering. And just to clarify, when Buddhists say suffering, they don't just mean like extreme physical pain. It means something more along the lines of dissatisfaction or disappointment. Something I haven't mentioned yet is that there's a certain element of humor in Zen. A lot of stories used to aid teaching students are set up almost like jokes, and humor is kind of like a form of Zen, because if something is funny, you laugh spontaneously. It's involuntary, which is similar to how they think of enlightenment. A lot of Zen stories involve some mundane interaction between student and teacher, and the story will end with the student suddenly becoming enlightened. My favorite one goes like this. A monk says to his teacher, "I've been at this monastery for quite some time, and I've yet to receive any instruction from you on how to attain Buddhahood. Well, have you had your breakfast yet?" The teacher responds, "Yes," says the monk. "Well, then go and wash your bowl." At that moment, the monk was enlightened. And you see this a lot in Zen stories, where partaking in usual, boring, everyday life activities can lead to some sudden insight, which is where the idea of direct transmission comes in. It's as if the teacher is somehow able to evoke some sudden insight within the student that goes beyond the normal, logical way of understanding things. And there are stories of Zen masters farting out loud at inappropriate moments, which somehow results in the sudden awakening of students. There are stories of Zen masters literally chopping cats in half just to make a point. And there's also lots of confusing, paradoxical statements. Zen masters are kind of like pranksters who don't really take themselves too seriously. But I think there is a point to all the weird stuff they do and say. Another thing that is used often in some schools of Zen is koans. Koans are kind of like riddles used to aid in meditation. The most famous one is probably, what is the sound of one hand clapping? Now, there's a lot of debate over what this means and what the answer is. Some say the answer is nothing, because there is no sound, you can't clap with one hand. But others say the point is that they are impossible to answer, and that this conflict can evoke the sudden insight that they're seeking. And that's partly why I like Zen Buddhism. A lot of the teachers don't take themselves too seriously. And it honestly kind of seems like a lot of them are just bored and trolling people who are taking the enlightenment stuff a little too seriously. Yeah, I still don't really get it, bro. Well, there isn't anything to be gotten. Bruh, you know that doesn't make sense. But there's no sense to be made in the first place. What the hell? You can levitate? Yeah, dude. I'm a level 99 Zen Buddhist. Of course I can levitate. Okay, well, you never really defined what enlightenment is, or what a lot of stuff is. How do I even know if this thing is even real? I don't need to define my words. I can levitate, bitch. Anyways, later, nerds.
Well, there you have it. What'd you think about the end stuff? About the maybe taking things too seriously and stuff like that?
Well, it depends on how much you're suffering.
Yeah.
If there's somebody who is going along just fine, you know, what are you gonna like pin them down and be like, you need to get enlightened? Does that make any sense to you? You know,
I've also heard some people say like it finds you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah,
kind of. So I don't know.
that kind of makes sense.
But no, that's a good introduction, I think, to Zen Buddhism out there. Hopefully you guys liked our reaction on this, and if you did, don't forget to hit the like, subscribe, share us with a friend, and everybody, until next time,
Stay spiritual.